For 3 years, the McStay family were missing. They were a mystery, a headline, a grainy image on a border surveillance tape. But on November 11, 2013, the mystery died. The motorcyclist who found that first fragment of a skull had stumbled upon a makeshift graveyard. 2 shallow pits had been dug into the hard, sun-baked earth of the high desert. As forensic anthropologists meticulously brushed away the sand, the horror of what had happened to Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joey Jr. began to emerge. This wasn't a family that had started over. This was a family that had been discarded. In the first grave lay Joseph McStay and his youngest son, Joey Jr. Joseph's body was wrapped in a heavy white blanket. In the second grave, only feet away, were the remains of Summer and 4-year-old Johnny. But it was what was inside the graves with them that sent chills through the investigative team. In the pit with Summer and Johnny, investigators found a 3-pound Stanley sledgehammer. It was a heavy, industrial tool, the kind used for demolition. Near Joseph's body, they found a child's, transformers, pants, and a diaper. The autopsy reports were a gut punch to the community. This wasn't a quick, merciful end. Each member of the family had died from blunt force trauma to the head. The killer hadn't used a gun. He hadn't used a knife. He had looked them in the eye and used a sledgehammer. Even more devastating was the realization that the children had likely watched their parents die before the same fate was visited upon them. The discovery changed everything. The Mexico theory was dead. The voluntary disappearance was a lie. This was now a quadruple homicide. And the focus of the investigation turned back to the very beginning, back to the last person to see them alive. Chase Merritt was more than just Joseph McStay's business partner. He was a man Joseph had tried to help. Merritt had a criminal record, grand theft and burglary, but Joseph believed in second chances. He had hired Merritt to build custom water fountains. He had even loaned Merritt money to help him stay afloat. But as the FBI and San Bernardino detectives looked closer at the days surrounding February 4, 2010, they found a trail of digital breadcrumbs that Merritt couldn't explain away. On the very day the family disappeared, someone had logged into Joseph's business QuickBooks account. That someone had begun writing checks. Over the next few days, while the McStay dogs were starving in Fallbrook and the family was lying in the desert, Chase Merritt was busy. He wrote himself checks totaling thousands of dollars, backdating them to before the disappearance. He even called QuickBooks customer support, pretending to be Joseph, to delete records that might show the transfers. But the most damning evidence wasn't the money. It was the phone. On February 4th, the night the family vanished, Chase Merritt's cell phone didn't stay at his home in Apple Valley. It pinged a tower just miles from the McStay home in Fallbrook. And on February 6th, the day police believed the bodies were buried, Merritt's phone spent several hours pinging a tower in the high desert. The location? Less than 2 miles from where the graves would be discovered 3 years later. When detectives asked him about this, Merritt's composure began to crack. He claimed he was in the area to look at a job. But he couldn't name the client. He couldn't provide an address. He was the man who had the motive, money. He had the tool, a sledgehammer. And now, he had the location. The trial of Chase Merritt didn't begin until 2019, nearly a decade after the family vanished. It was a grueling, emotional marathon that lasted 6 months. The prosecution's case was built on a mountain of circumstantial evidence. They argued that Merritt was a gambling addict who was being squeezed for money. He knew Joseph was about to fire him. He knew the McStay business account was his only lifeline. They presented DNA evidence. Not from the house and not from the graves. The killer had been too careful for that. But they found Merritt's DNA on the steering wheel and gearshift of the McStay's Isuzu Trooper, the car abandoned at the border. This was the missing piece of the puzzle. The prosecution argued that Merritt had killed the family in their home on the night of February 4th. He had then driven their bodies to the desert, buried them, and later drove their car to the border to stage a disappearance. It was a brilliant, cold-blooded ruse. By planting the idea that the family fled to Mexico, Merritt had bought himself years of freedom. But the defense had a counterargument that still haunts the case to this day.
If Chase Merritt killed this family in that house, where is the blood? Where is the DNA? You say he used a sledgehammer on 4 people in a carpeted living room, and yet you found not one drop of blood? It's impossible.
It was a powerful point. The McStay home had been processed by forensics multiple times. They used luminol to find hidden blood traces. They pulled up floorboards. They checked the drains. It was a powerful point. The McStay home had been processed by forensics multiple times. They used luminol to find hidden blood traces. They pulled up floorboards. They checked the drains. Nothing. How could a man commit a quadruple homicide with a sledgehammer and leave a house so clean that a family could move in months later and never notice a thing? The defense argued that the police had tunnel vision. They pointed back to that grainy border footage. They argued that the 4 people walking into Mexico were the McStays. They claimed the family had been murdered in Mexico by cartels, and that Merritt was being framed by a lazy investigation. In June 2019, the jury reached their decision. Guilty. On all 4 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in silent tears. For Michael McStay and the rest of the family, it was the end of a 10-year nightmare. Chase Merritt was sentenced to death. But even with a conviction, the how and the who remained shrouded in shadow. If Merritt killed the family on February 4th, who are the 4 people in the video on February 8th? Skeptics of the verdict point to this footage as the ultimate reasonable doubt. The figures in the video match the heights and builds of the McStay family perfectly. Was it a coincidence? Or did Merritt hire 4 people to walk across the border in the dark, knowing they would be captured on camera? If he did, he never confessed to it. And then there is the question of help. Could one man, acting alone, kill 2 adults and 2 children, transport them in a single vehicle, dig 2 graves in rocky desert soil, and clean a house to a surgical standard, all within a matter of hours? Some investigators believe Merritt must have had an accomplice. But no one else has ever been charged. No one else has ever been named. Today, the house on Merritt Drive has new owners. The desert graves have been filled in. Chase Merritt sits on death row in San Quentin, still maintaining his innocence. But the story of the McStay family leaves behind a lingering, unsettling chill. It is a reminder of how thin the line is between the American dream and a nightmare. We like to believe that evil is loud. We like to believe that it leaves a mess. We want to believe that if a monster entered our home, the walls would scream. But the McStay case teaches us something different. It teaches us that evil can be patient. It can be a best friend who checks in on you. It can be a business partner who offers a handshake while holding a sledgehammer behind his back. It teaches us that a family can be eating popcorn and watching a movie at 7 p.m., and by midnight, they can be nothing more than a memory buried under the desert stars. The McStays didn't go to Mexico. They didn't run away. They were taken. And while justice has been served in a court of law, the silence they left behind in that house, the smell of rotting porridge, the barking of abandoned dogs, the bowl of popcorn on the sofa, that silence will never truly be filled. In the end, we are left with the haunting words of Joseph's brother, Michael, spoken shortly after the bodies were found. It's not the outcome we wanted, but it's the truth we have to live with. As we close this case, several questions remain. If the murder happened in the house, why was no blood ever found? Who were the 4 people in the border surveillance footage? Did Chase Merritt act alone? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive compelling, please subscribe for more investigative true crime.